Hi, I'm Julie Kennedy. I'm a user interface artist at 4J Studios and I work on Minecraft Console Edition. I'm an interface artist, so I focus on game menus and interaction within the game. So for Minecraft specifically, a lot of that will be we get to redesign components inside the game for a theme. So when we did the Super Mario pack, I would look at the Minecraft interface and then I'd think, how can I redesign this to make it feel like Mario? The thing about being a user interface artist is that it's a bit difficult to explain, because especially when you're talking about working on Minecraft, for some people it's such an exciting game and they're like, oh, that's so cool. Do you build this? What skins do you make? And I go, well, let me tell you about these menus, and they just immediately turn off. It's just, no, it's boring, don't care. It's difficult to explain how exciting for me it is to get to work on something that is such a big part of the game, even though you're never thinking about it. I really wasn't expecting to work on such a big product in my first job. You come to Dundee and you don't realise that these big games are being made here. I had no idea that Minecraft was being made while I was at university just 5 minutes down the road. You think almost that you're not going to be at that level where you can work on these things, and that kind of stops you applying for jobs. But you realise that companies are always looking for new people, and it doesn't actually matter if you're not the best artist in the world. If you turn up and they like you and you can prove that you're going to be really good to work with, you can end up working on these giant games as your first job. I was playing Minecraft when I should have been studying for the exams that would allow me to make Minecraft. It was kind of weird the first time I went home after getting the job. I was like, oh, I make Minecraft now, by the way. And they were like, oh, okay, that's cool. This is completely over folks' heads. Well, it took me a while actually to realise that when I wanted to work in games. Growing up in sort of rural West Coast Scotland, you don't get an awful lot of digital industry, let alone something as niche as games. So even though I was very passionate about games and I loved the idea of creating artwork for them, it never really stuck in my head as a serious career up until I was basically putting in my UCAS applications. I grew up making fan art of things that I loved, so one of the biggest things for me was Dragon Ball Z, and drawing all the characters from that and then playing those games, seeing all this beautiful 2D art. One of the most inspiring things for me when I was young was actually the loading screens for Grand Theft Auto games. These are amazing, just really graphical, visually impressive things that would just take your mind off the fact that you're doing a whole 2-minute loading screen. The requirements for my course, I did computer arts at Abertay, which is very much centred on digital art, not focused for games as much, but a wide range of digital media. I think the only thing that it asked for was a B at higher art. I was never that good at art education. I kind of struggled a little bit, even though I loved doing it. So I rocked up with a C in higher art, but a very decent portfolio, and they looked past the fact that I wasn't doing as well for my enthusiasm for creating art. When I first came to uni, I was very much wanting to be a character artist or an animator, because those were the big sort of glamorous things that you always talk about whenever you look at games. You go, oh, look at that character's hair, it looks amazing. So when I came up here, and I wanted to work in 2D as well, so that kind of made that a bit more difficult. And I applied for 4J while I was in third year. And at the time I was working at a co-op. I met way more game developers doing that than I ever did on my course or anything, because they'd come in to get their meal deals. I sent out a bunch of applications for basically every studio in Dundee. 4J were one of the ones nice enough to send a rejection back. I did Dare to be Digital 2014. I think that was one of the moments that I fell in love with UI as a thing, because we were making this iPad game and the organisers went, right, okay, well today it's time to test the game, so we brought in all these primary school children. I was like, okay, cool. And they're just handing them an iPad and they just start touching things and swiping things, and you're just looking at it, it's like, that's not a button. I don't know why you think that's a button. I don't know why you think that swipes. And these kids are going, this should be a thing. And I'm like, I don't understand why you think these should be things. And it just was so interesting that kids as young as primary school had patterns in their head of how things should work. And it was like so interesting. I just completely turned around. I was like, I'm not doing characters anymore. This is like, this, I absolutely adore this. And so I was talking to, I did Dare to be Digital and ended up going back to the co-op. A couple of folk from 4G would come in, I'm like, oh, I've stopped doing this now, I've gone into UI design. And they were like, well, we need a UI designer. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I applied again, like almost exactly a year later, and got the job. I think the most important thing for anybody who's considering getting into games is actually to just get out there and start making things. I went the university route, but there's so many people that just turn up to game jams and just learn in their free time. The great thing about games is that you can take that at your own pace. You can just start making whenever, and I think that's the most important thing, is just making things. And you don't even need to finish things, just start making them. And suddenly, like, you realise that it's not nearly as intimidating as you thought. We love it when people come in, especially from other industries. So like, if you were wanting to go into games, but oh, I've done this degree in English, I've done this degree in textiles or something like that, you actually, like, all these skills are transferable. You can come into games and make some really ridiculously good stuff because you've got outsider knowledge that games as a bubble we don't have. I think that there still is a problem with representation with women and minorities within games. We're making fantastic strides, especially recently, with putting diverse people to the forefront of game development, but we're still seeing a situation where they're not represented in games media and events. What we need to be doing is putting women and minorities to the forefront for a while so that people can see people like them. And as soon as you see someone like you, it becomes so much easier to imagine yourself in that role. When I was small, there was barely any women in games at all. My role model was just Todd Howard, and I never saw, I think the only woman I saw, it was in the special edition DVD for Oblivion, and suddenly it became so much more personable to me. It's like, there's someone, it's not just all these other people, it's people like me that can do it as well. And it's super important that we really hammer that home. And that there's a lot of pressure on women and minorities as well. As soon as we go to the forefront of things, as soon as we want to speak, there's this pressure to be as perfect as we need to be. There's this idea that we need to be so good at what we do that we can't be ignored, which we need to get away from, because it's okay to be all right, it's okay to be average, and we shouldn't be saying that, oh, we've hired this person, we managed to look past these things and because they're amazing. It's like, it shouldn't be the case. I think my number one piece of advice for anyone looking into the games industry, especially artists, is to not be afraid of being crap at something. Artists are so afraid of trying new things because we're all going to be rubbish at it, that we end up never trying new things and finding out what we actually are really passionate about. If I'd never done a bunch of new things that I was actually awful at, I'd never found out that I love user interfaces, I'd never have ended up here. So totally just don't be afraid to be absolute trash.